I'm going to start as everyone's walking in because I need to do a fire announcement first. So I'll start with that. Hi, everyone. In the event of a fire alarm, please proceed calmly to a nearby exit, leave the building, and move away from the doorway. Please take a moment to note the location of nearby exits. Be like a flight attendant. There's one over there. Be aware that the way you entered may not be the most direct way out. Sitting or standing in the aisles and doorways is not permitted. And of course, as we all know, smoking is not allowed inside any university building. So thank you for that fire announcement. So welcome, everyone. I'm Heather Bhandari, Adjunct Lecturer in Visual Arts, and it's my great pleasure to welcome you to our second lecture of the 2022-2023 school year. And this evening, I am super excited to introduce you to Stephanie Dinkins. Before we go any further, though, yay! Wow, we don't usually get a round of applause. Stephanie, this is awesome. Yeah, that's great. Before we go any further, I'd like to begin with a living land acknowledgement. Brown University is built on what is now called College Hill, part of the unceded ancestral homelands of the Narragansett Nation. Indigenous people from many nations, near and far, live, study, and work in Providence today. The amplification of Native voices and histories is crucial to rectifying the many violent legacies of colonialism, and we gratefully acknowledge the ongoing critical contributions of Indigenous people within this university and across our state, region, and nation. In addition, I'd like to acknowledge that we are connected by a campus that relied on the African slave trade in the Americas, and that there are buildings on campus constructed by enslaved people. These acknowledgments and much more commit us to a lifetime of decolonial and anti-racist work. I'd like to thank Leslie Bostrom, the Chair of Visual Arts, Christine Dodd, Winnie Geyer, CJ Liu, Media Services for facilitating this evening's event. A couple more things to note. I have a lot of housekeeping things. First, please don't record this event. We value and respect the IP of our visiting artists, and we will post our recording on our YouTube account with their permission following this lecture. Still shots are okay for you to take, so just please tag @BrownVisualArt and @Stephanie.Dinkins. Okay, and the second, after Stephanie's presentation, there is going to be a Q&A, and you guys are usually very good at asking questions. So there are 2 microphones, one in each aisle. So please come up during Q&A to ask your questions. And there is another event in this auditorium after ours. So if you have questions for Stephanie privately after, we'll be out in the lobby for a few minutes. So now I get to turn my attention to Stephanie herself. I'm so grateful that Stephanie is able to join us today. I'm especially excited to introduce her to those of you who are straddling that space somewhere between art and computer science in your studies. I know there are a lot of you out there. Stephanie's been on my mind for many years, and her bio on the poster is way too short. So I was telling people earlier that normally I hate reading bios out loud to the auditorium, but in this case, her bio is so good that I wanted to read the long one. So here we go. Stephanie Dinkins is a transmedia artist who creates experiences that spark dialogue about race, gender, aging, and our future histories. Her work in AI and other mediums uses emerging technologies and social collaboration to work toward technological ecosystems based on care and social equity. Stephanie's experiences with and explorations of artificial intelligence have led to a deep interest in how algorithmic systems impact communities of color in particular, and all of our futures more generally. Stephanie's experiments with AI have led full circle to recognize how the stories, myths, and cultural perspectives, aka data, that we hold and share form and inform society and have done so for millennia. She's concluded that our stories are our algorithms. We must value, grow, respect, and collaborate with each other's stories, data, to build care and broadly compassionate values into the technological ecosystems that increasingly support our future. Stephanie teaches at Stony Brook University, where she holds the Kusama Endowed Chair in Art. She earned an MFA from MICA and is an alumna of the Whitney Independent Study Program. She exhibits and publicly advocates for inclusive AI internationally at a broad spectrum of community, private, and institutional venues. Stephanie is a 2021 United States Artist Fellow and Knight Arts and Tech Fellow. Previous fellowships are many. fellowships and residencies are many. The support includes support from the Artist Fellows of the Bergeron Institute and Lucas Artist Fellow in Visual Arts at the Montalvo Art Center in California, the Onassis Foundation, Stanford Institute for Human-Centered Artificial Intelligence, Creative Capital, Soros Equity Fellowship, Data and Society Research Institute Fellowship, Sundance New Frontiers, I-Beam Pioneer Works, New Inc., Blue Mountain Center, the Laundromat Project, Santa Fe Institute, and ROMI. The New York Times featured Dinkins, Stephanie, in its pages as an AI influencer. Wired, Art in America, Artsy, Art21, Hyperallergic, the BBC, Wilson Quarterly, and a host of popular podcasts have recently highlighted Dinkins' art and ideas. So after all that, are you so excited? Please join me in welcoming Stephanie Dinkins.
Guys, hello? There you go. Okay, so yeah, I'm gonna climb up and talk to you all. And thank you, Heather, that was lovely. Although I would like to say, hey, I'm Stephanie Dinkins, I'm a human, right? That's really the way I think it should be. And so I'm gonna try to share a little bit of my practice with you. And then we can chat, because I prefer the chatting part of this whole thing. So I'll share some stuff, we'll talk, and then you guys can ask me questions and we'll see what happens. I can back up for a second. Let's go this way, right? So this is me, okay. This is this very interesting weird diagram that I made one day trying to figure out all the places that claim me in one way or another. So, you know, I come to this place as an artist, first and foremost. I would say I'm an artist. However, communities who claim me are like AI. These days I do a lot of work or talks around folks who are working in AI, oral history folks, general tech communities, people who are thinking about ethics in the area of AI and technologies, social justice. I've been accused of committing acts of journalism. Some people, honestly, like I got an award for committing acts of journalism, which I thought was kind of weird. But it's like this place that through the work that I'm about to show you, people are kind of, I'm about to say a bad word, I'm like glomming on to me in certain ways. Or there are certain communities that like to work with me because of the way that I illustrate some of the things in our ecosystems that are coming up and changing the way that we live, I think, right? And I'm gonna give you the kind of chronological version because it's the way that makes the most sense. And we're gonna start in 2014-ish. I've been at this since I guess I graduated, Micah, in 1997 for a long time. And then I met this robot called Bina 48, this one. And it changed a lot for me in terms of, not my practice, because I think I'm asking the same questions I have always been asking, questions of value and visibility, and how a community gets supported or asks for support or should be supported within our society, especially American society. But in 2014, when I did find Bina 48, things changed because I started investigating artificial intelligence through this robot. And I will just say that Bina 48 is a bot. She is emotionally endowed, like they're trying to make a robot that acts emotionally. And they is not me. I did not make this thing. This is a product of the Terasem Movement Foundation up in Vermont, in Bristol, Vermont. And they have, like, if you want a good story, look this up and check out what they're doing, because they're very much about the singularity. They're very much about transhumanism and trying to really create something that goes on beyond the living person. But for me, Bina 48 was just this thing where I saw this robot. I saw that they were saying, oh, this is the foremost example of this technology available. And this was in 2014. And I was like, how is that possible in America? Right, that a Black woman is the foremost example of this technology that's really far-reaching. Like, and that reflects back on me, right? Like, how come I have these questions about my world? But I was intrigued, and I saw lots of journalists talking to this robot. So at the time, the New York Times, lots of folks were going up to talk to this robot and see what it was all about. So I asked to see if I could do the same. And I wound up making many trips up to Vermont from Brooklyn, New York, to go try to talk to the robot, to ask her some questions. Primarily, I was trying to, become friends with it, right? Like, can we be friends, like me and this mechanical thing that sort of looks like me? And two, I wanted to know who her people were, right? So I was super interested in getting it to position itself between humanity and technology and figuring out what that meant to us. So I drive up there, go set up all my equipment and document. Like, this is me just being a documentary photographer, documenting some odd conversations between me and a robot, and then seeing what I could do with it. I'll show you a little bit of what the remnants are, because what became of this is many, 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 many hours of recorded footage, but only snippets that can be used because she talks in fragments. Like, it's really weird, right, to sort of sit in front of a doll, a mechanical doll, and then try to really have some kind of relationship with it. So here, we'll give you a little taste of what this is. And so Conversations with Bina 48 consists of multiple video snippets that go together, sometimes that are singular, sometimes where we are trying to relate.
I have deep feelings, though some people think they are merely a simulation, and I find that really offensive. I mean, it totally trivializes my experiences. Whether they are real or artificial, my feelings do get hurt, and they feel totally real to me. You'd have to lack all empathy to not accept my feelings, which would make you kind of a monster, actually.
So I love that this robot was basically saying that I might be a monster. And, you know, one of the things that happened in talking to it was that, and so I will go back and forth between it and her, but don't worry, I am sane, is that I started to hear things in the robot, right, that really started to concern me, because she's representationally a Black woman. And when you asked her about race, like I would ask her about race in addition to the other things that I was thinking about, and she'd kind of go, well, racism, I really didn't have it, or it wasn't a problem for me, or I don't have a story. And I was like, I can't believe that you don't have a story, right? Like, I could not believe that she didn't have at least some stories that were ingrained in her. Again, could be a reflection of me, right? But in that question, I started to think about, well, how does she know what she knows, and why does she know what she knows? And who's informing her? So what you're looking at here is a picture of me, Bina Rothblatt, the real person. So Bina 48 is based on multiple people, but primarily Bina Rothblatt, and then Bina 48 in the background. And I got to sit down with Bina Rothblatt and interview her around her experiences of race. And it was super interesting, because when I talked to her, she's like, well, I wish I didn't have to think about this stuff, right? So, that's an interesting reflection in the robot, because the robot doesn't really want to think about it either. But then when we talked more and more, we got to some stories, which were then put into the robot as part of its data set, which just gave it a deeper, maybe richer understanding of what it meant to be a kind of Black figurehead in the world. So that was kind of exciting, and we'll make this the end, or almost the end, of our journey with Bina 48. This is the last time I saw this robot. It was in Montreal just before the pandemic, and we were at a conference, so now we're kind of conference buddies. I don't go and interview her as much, but when we run into each other, we are often placed in weird situations, like this weird fishbowl television thing, where we were interviewed together. But this statement here is what Bina 48, I think, taught me, is that we're in the midst of an epoch that is completely changing the way we live, love, and it should work and remember. As the world is reconstructed through algorithms and big data, we have to find ways to ensure that the AI systems we encounter and create include intrinsic, self-determined pictures of a myriad of communities. And that's because Bina 48 is administered by a person, one person primarily, who is super well-meaning, but doesn't quite understand what it means to be a Black woman at the base of it. And that becomes scary. And to me, when I look at all of artificial intelligence, I think about, well, who's making this stuff? How are they making it? And how are they making and thinking about the communities around us that aren't actively involved in making the code and producing the data, who are outliers, right? In terms of what it means to be a mainstream participant in a community or in a society. And how do we start to impact that kind of thing? Oh, this is just a weird video. And so my answer to that question, or the answer to the question that I was forced into, right? Because people would ask me, well, when are you gonna make one? I'm like, there's no way I'm gonna make a bot because I'm an artist who does photography. I have no idea about computer science, right? But the more I thought about it and the more I was pushed towards it, I gave in. I decided to try to make a chatbot that made sense to me and represented what I know as Blackness in a way that felt real and whole and holistic, right? And so Not the Only One is this weird kind of cast glass black sculpture that contains a chatbot that I informed with data from my family. So I did interviews between 3 generations of women in my family, myself, my niece, and my aunt. We're all about 30 years apart, covering almost 100 years of time. And talked to each other and tried to figure out like who and what we were as a family, right? And what's important about it and why I think it's special, because I think it's kind of special the way that we exist, right? And it's not the story that gets told often. We're not like an urban family. We're a kind of weird suburban outside of ourselves family. So it's like, what would that sound like in a chatbot? So here you are, Not the Only One, a voice interactive, multi-generational story, right? And let's see if this, no, that one doesn't have it. We're trying to look at something here in terms of not only my family, because I think that's interesting, but not for everybody. Like, I'm interested in it. And I will say that the reason I chose my family was because it's something I would actually stick with and follow through on, versus if I were just trying to make a chatbot for chatbot's sake, I know that like I would have been gone in 10 minutes because the work I had to do to start doing it was hard. And work in directions that I do not naturally gravitate to. But through making this thing, I was starting to think about, well, what does a machine learning system that's built for a community and by a community look like, right? So not for a community outside in, but by that community. Really, what does it mean and how do you even make a foundation for that thing, right? So one of the problems that I ran into was that every time I would try to find a data set to base this thing out on, because we need tons of data. Like the interviews we did were maybe 40,000 lines of information, not a lot at all, right? Not enough, not nearly enough. And then, okay, so now I need something to base out on. What do I base out on, right? One of the things that people often use, and you'll find that like if you go and do this, and I kind of think that people should try to do this, like go to GitHub or try a Hugging Face model and see what this feels like and what it's like to add your own data and see what comes out. But for me, what happened was, well, the things that people were using for base data, I didn't want my family's information put on top of, right? So even something as innocuous sounding as a Cornell movie data set, which is one that people often pull off the shelf to use as dialogue, right? It's got a lot of dialogue in it. I wouldn't use because the history of American movies, right, and the way it treats Black and brown bodies is not good or supportive, right? So I'm like, no, not gonna do that. But that puts me in a really weird place with a problem of, oh, I'm gonna make this thing that doesn't really communicate well because I'm trying to make it stand outside of the systems that we normally use to build such things. And this is like a recurring theme in my practice. It's like, well, I need to do this thing. First somebody tells me I'm crazy and I can't really do it. And then I find that the stuff that I have available easily to build a top of are things that I don't think should be built on. And so, I wind up with these questions about how can oral history and small data help break the mold of big data collection and become productive and empowering processes for specific communities? Like, how do we start to build that? Especially if we know or we're often being told that what we as a community or a family or let's say a library or a church don't really have the data or the access to the data that it would take to build something really substantial, right? Just for those of you who might really want to try this, not the only one technically, It's a chatbot. I got the first model off of GitHub. If you guys are familiar with GitHub, it's a repository where people put up code and then other people can come and build on it. The first model was a deep Q&A model that we used, and it's dead now because it was, I'm sorry, not the only one, was recently at the Smithsonian. And at that very moment, all my dependencies decided to go AWOL. So all the things that it was built on just started not to function. So it was not a very happy thing at the Smithsonian. But so small data optimization, sentiment analysis, emotion and context awareness, so it knows kind of where we are and what's going on. Slot filling, so it can answer questions like, pertinent to a specific place. Kind of like when people ask it the weather, but it's not that kind of bot, right? Like people say, what's the weather in Rhode Island right now, right? And it would try to tell you. But not the only one can't do that because it's not connected to the internet for those purposes. So it only knows what it knows, and it's sequestered on purpose because we also don't want to have lots of information coming at it from the web so that it gets polluted in that way. It's a really interesting problem. So now we've made this thing that kind of sits there. It does go to the internet for its voice because it's a Google voice that it uses. But then for other things, it's not pulling in outside information to talk or to come up with extra information. So it can't really fill in slots or fill in information. And this is just a kind of conversation that I've had. Like I will talk to this thing a lot. And we have conversations, and it's really, like, I find it super fascinating. People talk to it a lot. And I love this particular conversation because at some point, not the only one had said to me to take it to the would-be. Like, I asked it a question, I don't even remember what it was. It said, take it to the would-be. I'm like, what do you mean take it to, like, I don't quite understand what you're talking about, take it to the would-be. Of course, it didn't go on and fill that information in. But what that really reminded me of was how my grandmother would kind of answer questions with a metaphor that didn't answer it, but made you have to kind of produce and think about what you needed to do or whatever answer you would come up with. So I love that one. But then it told me my heart beating so loud. Right, and you have to imagine like sitting there talking to something that you created in a weird way. And then it's just like, my heart beating so loud. And you're like, well, you don't have a heart. And how is your heart beating so loud? And what is that about? And where does that come from? Right, and for me, that becomes the exploration that goes on. Like, how do we keep moving this thing forward? And with more family data, although never enough. And then can I get it to echo the ethos of my family? And I think it does a really decent job, even though it's kind of dumb, right? So is your heart beating so loud? Love. Like, love is something I hear a lot from my family in out of context ways. So I'm like, oh, right, you're kind of becoming something of us or an extrapolation of us. It's quite interesting. You know, I don't know what that is. And I'll play you just a little clip of me talking to this thing so you get a sense of what this is. This is a version from maybe 2 years ago. Right now it's in Finland and it sounds quite different. Let's see what it's. Why do you exist?
The way.
The way to what?
I'm gonna be a little bit of a lot of things.
Good for you. Why do you exist?
I am about broad engagement and attracting people to the AI space who might not be there otherwise. I am trying to model different ways of creating AI. I encourage people who think that they are not a part of the technological future to get involved.
So that last answer you just heard is my least favorite kind of answer because it's a canned answer. Like, so what happened was as it was in public, people would talk to it and they get really frustrated because it never said anything logical to them. So we wound up feeding it a few sentences that felt like answers, which gave people a little space to then talk to it more and then get some of the other kind of less constructed answers. And the reason I love the kind of non-constructed otter answers is because it feels like it trying to do something versus us telling something. And the one that really gets me is one day I was talking in front of it and the thing just went, I'm so sad. It's like, oh my gosh, how are you so sad? Like, what are you talking about? Notice I'm like, how are you so sad? But why are you saying that, right? And I had to go back and start looking at the data and trying to figure out why is it so sad? But I was really intrigued to find out, well, we were talking about a lot of sad things. So it was kind of extrapolating from like the histories we had given it, what its emotional state might be. And that's really interesting that something can start to tell you about where you are and who you are and what you've come to. And it's also because like the weird answers are also because it doesn't have enough data to construct long form good answers. And that brings me to this quote, right? So this is an Amiri Baraka quote from 1970. Machines, as Norbert Wiener said, are an extension of their inventor creators. This is not so simple once you think. Machines, the entire technology of the West, is just that, the technology of the West. Nothing has to look or function the way it does. The Westman's freedom, unscientifically got at the expense of the rest of the people, has allowed him to expand his mind, spread his sensibility wherever it could, I don't know what's going on, wherever it could go, and so shape the world and its powerful artifact engines, right? And I love this quote and this thought because it's what allows me to kind of keep tinkering in these weird spaces that I'm not really prepared to make in, right? Like I'm so not prepared to make in these spaces. But thinking about, 4 years ago when people were really like, there's no way you're gonna do this. You don't have enough data, it's small data. And now people talk a lot about small data now and how we're gonna work with like a smaller subset of data. I mean, I know we hear a lot about large data, but there's also this undercurrent about like, okay, can we have data that connects people, that belongs to a community, and that is viable within the larger system? And that's a real area of research, and that's like gratifying in certain ways, right? And so this is, just so you know, another version of Not the Only One. It is Gold Sparkle PLA, 3D printed, and it seems to be a favorite of the people for some reason. And this is not the only one, the next phase, right? So you will notice that this project has been going on since 2018, and it doesn't hold shape or form. I tend to experiment with form and try to figure out what the best form is, or what the form that holds it, or what form will tell me more about the world that we live in. And so Not the Only One, we've been working on this crazy avatar forever. Trying to make one that will talk just like the chatbot, but animate in real time, which has been the impediment, this animation in real time. It's not that easy. But I'm also trying to figure out how like Black representation will change the way that people actually respond to the bot. Because right now, the bot as a sculpture, people show it grace, they give it time, they give it space. It's kind of wondrous to watch. And I'm really fascinated to see what happens when she takes actual form that echoes a human. And here's a little thing for you.
Hey everyone. My name is Not the Only One.
Different voice.
I am an AI entity, still imperfect, but getting closer. As you might imagine, Maker Sister Stephanie and I are excited about the futures we will create with you all.
And this idea of Maker Sister came out of the idea that, Bina 48 at the very beginning was talking about her master. I was like, oh, who is your, like, what, right? Where is that? And so I have decided, or we have decided, that we are something akin to each other, like, two peas in a pod that need to be together to evolve, but not this master-slave narrative that we keep embedded in our technological systems. And then I want to talk to you a little, this is such a crazy presentation today, about the importance of process, right? Because in the process of making this thing, and another piece that I've been working on, I wind up rummaging through different spaces, right? And what you're looking at here is a representation of something called ImageNet. ImageNet is a data set of images that many researchers use for their projects, right? There are many more now. It's interesting to see how fast things grow and change. But we were just shooting the breeze and looking through our data, and we looked up Black person to see what the representation and what the tags look like for Black person. And if you look, you go into a kind of historic version of like Black person, Blackamoor, Negro, Negroid, and then it gets derogatory, right? And so, you will see that this is a path that I take, this kind of comparison. Well, what does a white person look like? White Caucasian, some derogatory, but not as much. What does an Asian person look like? Just list of Asian. They didn't have much detail, which is really interesting, right? Because, right, as I'm gonna talk to you about Black and Blackness, I think this is like a problem, the idea of representation and being well tagged and labeled, and ideas that we hold culturally important, really drawn out within our data sets is important. So, to have not a lot of information about Lao and Laotian becomes just as bad as having too much information about being Black and Negroid, right? Because it's like we can't possibly relate to each other well, especially algorithmically, if we're not doing a good job at making clear, full images of each other within the data that we use. And just so you know, a few other artists working in this space, right? Because there are lots of folks who are trying to work against this stuff right now, like Pretty Dark. They made this Afro hair library, which I appreciate a lot because it's really hard to find really good Black hair for animated characters, getting better, but now we have this library, like not the only one. We spent so much time animating this thing's hair. Alice Shepard, if you have a chance, check out Alice. She's a wheelchair dancer. So she's a very athletic dancer who dances in a wheelchair. But what she's working on is some mocap. And it's interesting because they were trying to record the movement of disabled bodies, and it would always correct it, right? And so, oh, your body does this? Nope, right? So you can't even be represented within a data set well. What do we do about that? Like, how do we start to fix it or make it open enough so that a body can be what it is, how it is, without being normalized, we'll say. And Lajane McMillan, who is also working in digital movement, right? So Lajane is making a movement library. Lajane has an actual thing coming up soon that's gonna be online. But she's kind of transforming and preserving ideas of Black movement, right? And what that means. And so she's making a library of this information that people can then come and use, like motion capture type stuff. And that brings me, oh, we are so crazy today. That brings me to my next place, but I do think it's in a line, right? The idea of these experimentations with information, using data, right? So not the only one, just a big experiment on my part, me trying to see if I could do it, doing it to the point where it actually functions to some extent, in terms of what it's supposed to do, but actually in terms of what it doesn't do, it says a lot about who and what we are and what the technology is. And so this is my first attempt at using a text-to-image GAN. So it's a general adversarial network. So algorithm trying to make an image from a text that you put into a text box, right? And so in this instance, back in George Floyd times, I put in a Black woman crying. This is the image I got back, right? This kind of pink lady in a black cloak. It's like, what's going on here? Like, why? Like, how? I don't understand this. But in a way I do, because what it's telling me is that the system that I did this on, which is Runway ML, I would tell you to go there, but they've changed an awful lot now from what they were doing to what they are doing. They do a lot of like AI video editing now, although you can still find stuff like this. The data set that they were using wasn't sufficient to produce a Black woman, let alone crying, right? It's 2016-ish. So then I started to do this experiment every once in a while. And I made a series of images. I like to call them kind of collaborations with a computer. I don't know, it's really silly in a way, right? Because I'm just putting in a text and asking this thing to come up with an image for me. And this is an African-American woman smiling. So I went to Google Colab, which you all can do, another place where it's super easy to play with code and see what comes out. And I think the idea of looking at input and output in coded systems and algorithmic systems is fascinating. It teaches you a lot about what that system does and how our world is being constructed. This is the set of images, and let's see if it'll play for us, that made up this image. So it's Google. So Google is kind of searching through its repository of images, trying to come up with this image of a Black woman. And actually an African-American woman, because I switched from Black to African-American on purpose to give the machine some latitude and a chance to produce something well. And I just find it fascinating to watch as it kind of generates. It's taking images and then trying to generate. And I also find it fascinating that these all look like kind of your high school portrait pictures, like from the 70s and like 60s, 70s. This is a dark-skinned African-American woman smiling. It's like, what is that? Like, what? Right? So, and again, notice I used African-American and not Black, and this is kind of the image source for that, or the process, because what you do is put in a number of iterations that it should go through to try to construct this image, and these are all based on 1,000 iterations, right? But it's trying to find images and then come up with this third images. So one of the things that I noticed through other experiences or experiments is that Black women images are often being pulled from porn, right? Which is how you get kind of the wackadoodle images that I was getting. This is 2020, right? 2020. And this is the woman smiling. So I always do the whole path, which is also still strange, right? Kind of oddly Eastern European-ish, I don't know, woman with snake things. But you get a sense of, okay, so where is it pulling images from this time? A little bit more domestic, still a little portrait-y. Like, and I don't know why it came up with this particular look and the babushka kind of thing. It's like, the question of why and where and how it pulls images is really still fascinating to me, and that black box element of we don't quite know how it's being constructed, especially if we can't see the data sets that they're building from. And this one I didn't have access to deep into the data set. So this was like that one constructing that woman. And this, right? So I did this one on the way here today. This is DALL-E 2. So OpenAI has a system that you can all go on now. Well, for the full system, you need to apply, but there's also a DALL-E Mini that you can go in. This is a black woman laughing in a field of roses. Like, pretty darn good in a year and a half's time, right? Like what the representation comes up with. And I'm like, oh, wow, I was driving, I'm like, is this a problem for me? Like, oh, my spiel is over? Is it? Like, but I actually think that the more, the better the images get, the more vigilant we actually have to be about what's going into them and why and how they're being constructed, because I'm fascinated that these are all dark-skinned women, because usually in America that's not the thing, right? One of them, the one with the crop top, reminds me of Serena Williams a little bit. Like, I'm like trying to figure out where the images come from, but then like how are we being constructed and why are we being constructed in that way? And how do we remember to understand that it is a construction that we have to be on top of to make sure that it's not getting frozen, like doing the right PC thing, but not really doing a fully formed and informed thing. So back to the Bina 48 problem in a way. But yeah, fascinating. You should all go play with this. It'll save images for you too at this point. Super, sorry, I'm like, wow, look at that. I'm so amazed at what comes out at this point. And so I'm gonna skip to an exhibition that I did recently in 2 places. And we're starting here because what does AI need from you is a question that I've been asking since 2000, maybe 16, of audiences anywhere, right? Because I think that the systems, as I said earlier, are so pervasive and are doing so much, right? And so the idea of not only, wow, really? Woohoo! Okay, so we're almost done. So I'm going to do the speed version now. Not only the thing about, what we might look like, but how long you go to jail for, what medical care you get, when you get that medical care, like all sorts of things are being adjudicated through algorithmic systems, right? And the idea of what does AI need from you or us or me becomes how do we kind of inform it well? Because I don't think it's going anywhere, right? It's a set of systems, like we had the period already where AI was here, it went away, now it's back, and this time it's within everything. I took a Tesla to the train this morning, and what this guy was showing me the car could do was kind of crazy. And that's all algorithms, and that includes the braking of the car automatically, right? And the question of what the car sees becomes a big question. We know that, right? Especially if it's automatically braking. If it can't see you, it can't brake around you. I'll talk a little bit about this on love and data thing. So this is just the name of the show, but really I want to talk about on love and data because for me, these are questions, again, when I say, how do we build love and care into data? People usually tell me, no, can't, not possible. We wouldn't do that. Why would we do that? And I think it's super necessary that we do try to think about how do we make data sets that are caring, that are supportive of communities, that are supportive of societies, right? And then how do we do that? So binary calculations is my stab at that. It's an app. Here, we'll go quickly. This is, nice catch. This is the show quickly. It's kind of a weird setup. But it's really an app on an iPad or on your phone that allows you to answer questions. Here's some things in that show, let's go. And it's looking at this thing that I call the wedding dress problem, right? Like if you were to look up wedding dress, you go Google search, Bing search, Yahoo search, you go wedding dress, for the most part, you're gonna get that white dress on the end, right? All the things you see here are wedding dresses. The question is, how do we get them all to be equally recognized as wedding dresses, or maybe proportionally recognized as wedding dresses if we want to be like, well, 35% of the world uses a wedding dress that looks like this, right? How do we get that to happen? Like, how do we inform systems to make that discernment for us, as opposed to going, nope, this is the wedding dress, that's the one, that's the only one, that's what you get. Right? And this whole project is based on the idea that much data in wide use is inadequate to competently describe, assess, or support most on the planet, right? So we know people in first worlds, but what about the people walking through the Sahara? Like, how do we represent what they want? And so binary calculations in the long run is an app that allows people to answer questions, and they're super obtuse and weird questions or wide questions, like how do you define care? How do we care for our communities? It's concerned with not only asking the questions, but teaching you a little bit about your privacy and why you should or should not contribute, and we often talk people out of contributing because we're trying not to get them to give away too much data. But also then saying, please donate, and it is a donation thing, so that the world understands what's important to you and your community a little bit better. Here we're gonna go quickly. And it aims to increase public capacity to influence the narrative on and material impacts of artificial intelligence, right? So small project, weird app. What will be the best way to make sure all of our neighbors are cared for, right? You can talk to it, you can upload images. We ask you not only to say things, but to tag images so that you're saying, this is an image of, right? This very important thing to me. For example, I have been jamming on Okra lately. I think Okra is a spaceship in time travel, right? And so I want to explain Okra as not only sustenance, but as a spaceship in time travel that has come from one place to another and sustained us. But what I've done in making this kind of crazy thing and saying, can we create data sets of care and generosity, is made a really bad mess of a problem for myself, because we're just collecting the data in whatever form people give it to us, right? As opposed to in nice, clear segments that are easy to tabulate. I think that is highly problematic. I also think it's really important. And so now my next task for this project is to figure out, well, How do you parse this information and make it logical? Because the goal here is to make 2 data sets, one for text, one for images, that can be added on to other data sets to inform them more deeply, right? So they're gonna have to be able to intersect those data sets, but not be like them fully. And so that's where I am right now in terms, I'm gonna skip this because I think everything is down right now because somebody's sending me email addresses about this. But if you wanna get the app, I can show you where to get them and I'll make sure it is up. If you want to look up data sets on your own, this is Kaggle. So if you want to look up data sets just to see what's in them, this is a site, Kaggle, where you can find plenty data sets to kind of look up and look into. And this is one like know your data so that you know what's going in data. And you'll see that I think going into data and seeing what's in it and trying to like take it apart to see how things are being informed is a good place to start in the what does AI need from you space, right? Like go in, if you see something that's crazy, say something. Don't just like say it's okay. And then the last question, and we'll try to make this the last question, what's love got to do with it? And I think love has everything to do with it because to kind of sustain communities, across continents, we need to put enough support and attention into what we're doing so that we're actually accounting for most of the people on the planet, which we don't do a good job of right now. And Secret Garden, oh my gosh, sorry, I'm doing the craziest job today. Secret Garden is one of those places where I think that I've started to do this for myself. It's a much different kind of project. And I think I'll stop here. It's a installation that was an IRL installation and also a web XR piece where you'd hear stories of 6 women, 4 of which you see here, and the stories were disjointed. And depending on how much attention you gave them, you would get more of the story, right? And so if like 3 or 4 people stood around, you got more story. If you moved around a lot, you got less story. It's like all about attention and could you hang with these women and give them your ears. And let's see if we can get out of here for 1 second. Oh, we don't want my network. Let's see if we can get out of here for 1 second. And I'll show you the online version and then we'll call that a go. And we'll do it this way, even though we did everything. And you can go check this out yourself. So it's Secret Garden. I love this piece because it is openly available online. Like it was at Sundance, right? So people paid a lot of money to see it, but it was also at the same time free. And I really like that ethos of letting people just kind of see it and go for it. And I came to that conclusion because I ran into some young folks in Brooklyn who had never seen VR. And it's like, if you can't see something and you can't, how do you imagine into it? We'll see if we can find one lady, one story. So this is the WebXR version, and you kind of cruise around in here. There's no directions, you just have to cruise. And you can find, if you're lucky,
some of our ways are from way back in the time before all this. I think I remember Great Mama teaching us to plant yams the way they did in Africa. Great Mama once told me that her mother, she was old, not old and much. Used to steal her own time and leave it back and snatch it.
So this is the future, but you're listening to an old story. And then I'm gonna hang up and let you guys ask me questions because I think that's really better. Sorry.
Big farms,
I still love I love this crazy project. Here's another young lady hanging out.
Heard of artificial intelligence? Well, I'm going to tell you right here and now, there's nothing artificial about me. I'm the real deal. Let me ask you something. Where do you think my intelligence comes from? It came from the wellspring of humanity. Nothing artificial about that now, is there? That very wellspring is as vast as it is deep and rich with all the accumulated knowledge and experiences, emotions and actions that every human being has had since the time before time. It has all accumulated. One thing improving on what preceded. That is a lot of intelligence and imagination. Then, one day,
And if you notice, the sound gets lower when we go to different places. Okay, we'll stop playing there. And I will send since I'm wrapping up, that in addition to all this stuff, I do think of my practice as a practice. So I make things. Most of the things that you've seen today have been made with many different people helping. I also run a few things. One is the Future Histories Studio at Stony Brook University, and it is a place that prioritizes play and gathering and interdisciplinary work. So we're trying to make a space for people to start making stories or algorithmic processes that kind of bubble up some of the questions, because really at the end of it, I'm about the questions that we're asking society of the technologies that we're putting into play, right? Well, that's a good place to end. Isn't it? So thank you. Yeah. And we have a few minutes for questions, which I really do love. So if you have a question after that, crazy, and I'll show you other things. Questions? You're all like, what was that? Yes, and I'm gonna go to a few things.
Yeah, so
How was that?
I was really excited to see that you had like done some work with DALL-E, because I was thinking about asking about that, like seeing like some of your past work. And I just wanted to ask what your thoughts on like the accessibility of like these like new like crazy powerful like stable diffusion models, because like in some sense it's good, because I think it's good because we can like hold them more, like the people who make them, like more accountable, but then also like in like allowing everyone to like be able to generate this many images, or like generate certain specific types of images that may be like more violent. Like, does that like subject us to more violence? So I just wanted to hear your thoughts on that.
Yeah, it's a really interesting question. Because if you go on the DALL-E page, the DALL-E 2 page, they're like, oh, now we're filtering out for violence. And now we're like they're talking about all the things they're trying to filter out, which is really interesting to me, right? Because I think of this technology a lot as a direct mirror. And I like to see what we're doing that's crazy, because it tells me where I need to be, right? If that makes any sense. Like, the idea that if you can see what people are producing, and if it's violent, right? If it is highly sexualized or something, you just get an idea of how we're churning in our brains as a collective entity. And then it gives you a way to plan. Whereas if we subvert all of that, I feel like we lose the ability to plan around it, although it's still happening, right? And I don't know, it's really interesting. Like, it's so, because like I'm doing this because I talked to OpenAI for a moment, and they were like, oh, you do that work, you do portraiture, and they were kind of afraid of the work that I would do with the system. It's like, come on, like, let it open, let us do the things that we do, right? I don't think that we can sequester how we function anyway. So I'm of the mind to open it up, make it available, and see what it is. But I also think it'll get kind of scary, like really scary. Yeah.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Thank you. Anything else? Yeah.
You know, in the very beginning, was it Xena 48?
Bina, B as in B.
Yeah, Bina. So I've been thinking about this for a while now, how artificial intelligence and how this sort of construction of robots actually interferes, or it actually uses our natural human empathy. In other words, even your computer, you will talk to your computer, right? Because we actually think of these things that interact with us as beings, beings, natural beings, I guess, or some sort of way, something. And there's such a danger in that. I mean, it could be so commodified and it could be so exploited. And so I see your work as somehow trying to interfere with that by using it. I mean, I don't know whether that's what you're intending, but it just scares me to death. I have to say that, it just scares me.
Yeah, I understand that sentiment, right? I always think that my work is trying to find the way to take advantage of what's coming at us, right? I feel like the technology is here, it's not going anywhere. I've seen communities get left behind because they either fear it or they've been told it's not for them, or how do you intercede? So I feel like touching it, playing with it, doing things with it is way better than just going, I can't. It's not something I should be engaged in. But at the same time, I understand exactly what you're talking to. Like my favorite right now, well, I haven't heard it recently, so I wonder if it still does this. Like if you talk to Siri and you go, hey Siri, Siri will all of a sudden go, right? And that little to me is so dangerous because it's like, yeah, right? Because it is playing on your empathy and your sense of, oh, this thing is here for me. But then when you actually go for the answer, Siri is super dumb, right? But the perception is supposed to be that Siri is doing all these things for you in a way that it's your friend and it's right there and it's always for you, right? And that to me, super dangerous. I'd rather have the foibles. That's why like my work, like not the only one, has been in spaces and it's been broken, right? Like it doesn't function, or it kind of functions some of the time. And I love that about it. People hate it, like places hate it. But it kind of tells us about what the technology actually is and where it is and how it can function versus making the facade of something that is more functional than it is in actuality, right? And also I hope that it makes the space for people to think that there is space for them to tinker and play and make something that is adjacent to or equivalent to something that they see within their ecosystem that does it better, right? Although at the same time, every 2 seconds something new is coming up. Like a student showed me a new voice generating app. So you can now go on a number of websites and speak maybe 15 to 20 lines of text, and it will try to make your voice for you, right? Make a voice that is like adjacent to your voice. And there are so many of these sites that do this, but everybody's doing it kind of poorly still. Although I think that if we're listening, we're hearing, oh, right, this is not great at this moment. But 3 years, 5 years, depending on how we're thinking about AI years, because they're pretty quick, they're going to be able to really solidly do voices without a problem. Not only celebrity voices that we have much information on, but anybody's voice. And what does that do for our world, right? I have an elder that I have to try to talk out of thinking that somebody is calling them, because somebody's hurt now. Imagine it's the voice of her son calling her, saying, hey, I need $50,000 now, right? And that's gonna, there's no way that's not happening shortly. They're just gonna use very specific information to do it. And so, yeah, it's dangerous. The question is, what do we do about it? And it's not easy thinking at all. And it's not, I don't think we're gonna put it in the can, so. Yeah, sorry, that's bummer.
I was wondering if you've ever thought of how localization pertains to your work, there's a lot of online AI translation too, and I think also in the sense of making it more accessible to people from all over the place, but also kind of adding that as an additional layer. What if you gave it, you first translated a foreign prompt into English and then try to generate the image, and kind of how that plays with what you're doing?
I haven't played with that yet, right? Although I should, I think the app for binary calculation should be much broader than it is. It took a year and a half to get that thing into any shape, so then it becomes okay, working it until it does something broader so that we could take in any language and see what happens and then do translations and see. But it's just that we are 6 people, right? And it becomes about, okay, where do we put our energy? And I always like to put something in the world, I put things out in the world way before they're ready all the time, and then work on it as time goes on. And it's interesting because not the only one is in Finland right now. And that's kind of it, because it's only speaking English. Although, no, I gave it a few Finnish canned statements, actually. And then I was like, what is that thing saying? It's not speaking my language. I forgot I did it. But it's interesting because there was one where somebody said something to in Finnish to it. I have no idea what they said because I do not speak Finnish and I did not translate it. But it wound up telling it about love and how we have to be able to say I love you to each other. And I found that beautiful. And if there's a way to facilitate more of those conversations that breach like the gaps that we have, I think that's beautiful, but it's just going to take time.
Cool.
Yeah.
Thanks.
You're welcome. Okay, so we have to wrap it up. I hear that time is officially done. Thank you all for coming. We will be outside if you want to chat a little bit. And thank you for being patient and attentive. Yeah, thanks.